You on this Monday morning. Brenden Martin and I, man,
crazy weekend.
Yeah, aren't they all? I mean, I was just texting with a listener, a viewer that watches daily down in Tuscaloosa, and she, great attorney, Mary Turner down there, really smart lady, great attorney in Tuscaloosa. And we're talking about Auburn and Alabama and the whole conference. It's nuts. And just when you think you've got it figured out, you have a weekend like this, and when everybody thought, well, this is a different Texas A&M, they go on the road to Columbia, and the wheels fall off.
Well, there's a scenario where we could have 6 teams with 2 losses going into these.
That was a scenario in the preseason. If you remember, there was one team picked first to go 11-1, and 5 picked to go 10-2. We're looking at right in the face. All right. Dave Tompkins from over in Beaufort, South Carolina is going to check in with us. Coach Ellis Johnson, and Coach Johnson can hear us, and hopefully, but we can't hear him. We'll try to get that worked out.
And we're going to try to get in Coach.
And Kevin Scarbinsky is going to check in with us, the Birmingham lead. Scarbo knows down in, of course, Birmingham, the Magic City, right in the central, in the center, the heart of our audience, which is mainly a southeastern footprint, as we cover all 16 of the SEC schools. We make a hearty effort, Dave, every day to talk about every one of them. And watching games over the weekend, there were so many of them, and there were games outside of the SEC that were crazy. And for the record, now James Franklin 1-13 against top 5 opponents. I don't know what happened with him having to yell at the students or whatever, but Dave, let's start unraveling this stuff. As everybody remember, smash that subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner so you'll get an automatic notification every morning, Dave.
Well, I nearly had a heart attack at about 11:48 Eastern time on Saturday when the news came out that Bryson Daly wasn't going to play for Army, but we managed to beat Air Force anyway, so happy about that. And he is scheduled to be back this week, so let's hope so. Had a foot infection. But no more Army football. Let's just focus on the SEC. Super impressed by Ole Miss. Not surprised by what South Carolina did. Boy, this is really shaping up to be an awesome race. I guess we have, 4 one-loss teams right now, 3 two-loss teams. To Brendan's point before the show, we are looking at a scenario where, you could perhaps have a 1-loss and a 2-loss team playing for the SEC championship. I mean, it's anyone's guess right now. Really looking ahead to a great game in Oxford, Mississippi this weekend with Georgia and Ole Miss. Just excitement all around. So yeah, I mean, this is the SEC season is turning out to be exactly what we thought it would be, and maybe even more so.
Do you think, Dave, that you can make a case that the league is down this year, or is it's just there's parity, and because of the portal, a lot of the 2s and 3s that you used to have are on the other teams now lining up against you on Saturday? I think that's what it is more than anything.
I think it's way up. I mean, I think the strongest conference got stronger. When you look at the AP top 25 right now, you have 8 teams from the SEC that are in. Second after that is the ACC with 5, so that's kind of a surprise. And then the Big Ten and I believe the Big 12 all each have 4. So yeah, there's going to be some more knocking out. And will there be 8 teams in the top 25 or in the selection committee's top 25 at the end of the season? Perhaps not, but it is by far the strongest conference. It's gotten stronger. And, when you look at, down at the bottom and, who would have thought that you have Auburn with only 1 win, Oklahoma with only 1 win. And then you have Mississippi State with 0 wins. But yeah, it is just, but Mississippi State plays everybody tough. So, I mean, it's just tough from top to bottom. And then who'd have thunk that Vanderbilt would win the state championship of Alabama? I mean, it's just been one story after another this year.
Yeah. And pretty soon frogs will fly. I think, Dave, Saturday night, I know you were watching cable TV because it's so darn expensive through the neighbor's window when they had the blinds pulled up. Did you watch the entire South Carolina Texas A&M game? And Your thoughts and comments, Dave, and I'll hang up and listen. Go Cox! Come on now.
Well, I call them wrong a whole lot more often than I call them right, but I called that one right. I just felt like that was a trap game. It seems like every year South Carolina dials up one game a year. Usually it's a home game where they just play extraordinary football and it leaves people here in the Palmetto State to wonder why can't they do that more often. But boy, they just were laying in wait and just pounced on the Aggies. And that was Texas A&M's opportunity, because they otherwise I think could run the table all the way to hosting Texas at the end. But now they got some work to do. They're a 2-loss team. They lost that home opener to Notre Dame. This doesn't really help Notre Dame's case trying to get in as an independent. But yeah, it's South Carolina did what South Carolina does. And I'm pretty interested in them now going to that snake pit that is Nashville, Tennessee now, and playing the Commodores this weekend. And they're right now a 3.5-point favorite, but I kind of like the Commodores in that game.
The Skinner box is what Audrey named it last year when they were renovating it. It was like a B.F. Skinner, the behavioral psychologist, getting out of there. It's a maze. But, you look at Diego Pavia and you look at Vanderbilt. And I sit there and I say, well, why didn't someone like Hugh Freeze go get him? Why didn't somebody else in that, I would say Auburn right now, they're not in that upper level, but traditionally they are. Go get that guy. But he brought more than just him to Vandy. He brought Jerry Kill, his coach, and 174 career wins as a head coach. And in 24 seasons, he's a damn good coach. And 5 of his teammates, I believe. You look at South Carolina, you saw that one coming. At some point, they were going to connect all the dots and play a full 60. That's why I didn't feel good about taking A&M on the road. This is a new A&M. It's different. As much as Mike Elko has made progress, Shane Beamer, if you're one of his players, you got to love playing for this guy.
Absolutely, and I think this is a program on the rise. Sometimes I'm the lone voice saying that. No, you're a homer. You live in South Carolina now. You're repping for the Gamecocks. But I do think they're a program on the rise, and I think they'll start to repeat what they did Saturday night more often. And they do have a chance to do that this Saturday with Vanderbilt. To Diego, I think there's going to be some evolved thinking around the portal going forward. I don't think the portal's going away, but I think in addition to talent, in terms of what you try to import from the portal, you also have to import competitiveness, a history of winning, and leadership. And you almost want one in your portal class to be a leader who kind of takes over for the new guys coming in from the portal. And I think that's really the case study with Diego Pavia.
Yeah, if you bring a guy in and he doesn't elevate the play of everybody in the room around him, you're not bringing in the right people.
Right.
And one guy, you talk about a force multiplier, that is Diego Pavia. And at the rate they're going, if they get to 8 wins, I believe he will have earned the Heisman Trophy. If it's supposed to be about the best player in college football, the best teammate, instead versus the guy that learns the playbook and just has these ridiculous Pac-Man stats. Look at all those quarterbacks when they get to the NFL. Baker Mayfield.
No, I'll be a homer again for Army. In my opinion, if the Heisman Trophy is based on what player is the most important to their team, then I think you have a co-winner this year. That's Bryson Daly from Army and Diego Pavia from Vanderbilt. Of course, they're not going to have all the stats, but they are so important to their team, and I think that matters. And if I get reincarnated as a college football coach, I'm going to build my team around the Diegos and the Brysons.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these kids are 7-on-7 superstars wearing all the compression T-shirts and everything like that. And they get there to college, and there was a recent podcast about so many of these quarterbacks, after Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes and the quarterback for the Bills who played at Wyoming, Josh Allen, now you've got guys that they just memorize the playbook. And they've got 15, 18 starts, maybe in college, and they just throw them in the NFL and expect them to be superstars. Well, it's blowing up in their face with all of them. They have a good run when they come in because there's not a real book on them in the NFL. That's where we are. The quarterback position has been changed, and I don't think for the better.
No, and it's really the outliers are the Tom Brady's and the Patrick Mahomes, and you look at their, how they got there. Brady sat on the bench at Michigan, and he bided his time, and then he sat on the bench at New England, and then when he got his opportunity, obviously, he became the greatest ever. Mahomes didn't sit on the bench, but he was a developmental player, and I think developmental programs are going to be just as prominent in the futures as they were in the past. And I just don't think you can just do, a new roster every year through the portal. I just don't think it's sustainable. And of course you're going to have some outliers that can do it. And who knows with Ole Miss's performance on Saturday, maybe Lane Kiffin's going to turn out to be right. I was really surprised about that game. I picked Arkansas. But, Lane's a lot smarter than I am. So, but I'm old school. I believe in developmental programs. Obviously, being a service academy graduate, I'm going to think that way because we have no choice but to be developmental.
Yeah.
But I do think it really matters.
I mean, it does. And no more is it important to develop players. It's more important anywhere than on the offensive line. And
yes.
We're just not seeing dominant offensive lines. Because everything's about the skill players at these 7-on-7. I think 7-on-7 football is good for compression T-shirts and all that gear and stuff. But it's not making for better linemen. And I mean, sure, you're going to go out there and look good as a defensive tackle in 7-on-7 drills. I'm just really wish we would think about look at Alabama with Jalen Milroe. I don't think he's a great quarterback, and all this the group think jumps on top of stuff so fast they all just repeat. They're like parrots, minor birds. Just Jalen Milroe. What did we hear all preseason? Carson Beck. He's the number 1 pick in the draft. Really? Let's see. First, the question that you should have asked is. You should have prefaced that by saying, let's see how he plays without Brock Bowers and without Ladd McConkey, who often said, I have a particular set of skills. I will find you. He reminds me of Liam Neeson.
Yeah. And look at Jacksonville and the cocktail party. And if Lagway doesn't go out, I mean, Carson Beck threw 3 interceptions. That game could have been different. Had Florida not having to make their quarterback change due to the injury. That game could have been different. Georgia looked great in Austin. I think that game really showed up Texas more than it really showed forward Georgia. I think Georgia is beatable. I'm never going to bet against Kirby Smart because I think he is now the best coach. Did I go out? Let's see.
No, you're good.
Okay, all right. So my computer is having problems, so I can't see the screen right now. But I'll keep.
You're all good.
Okay, awesome. All right, I won't make any weird faces. I can't see the camera right now, but that's okay. Yeah, but I really love your point about offensive lines. I mean that is where you need to develop an offensive line and an offensive line that is a unit. A contiguous unit that stays together for, say, 2 or 3 years. I mean, that program is going to win games. That program is going to get in the playoff and advance in the playoff because that offensive line makes the whole offense work. And it sustains drives, which allows the defense to rest, and then the defense can play better. Sure, we want big talent, edge rushers, and lockdown cornerbacks and wideouts that can separate from the defense. But you start with the offensive line. You start with linebackers. I think that the general. I'm sorry, Coach Ellis can't be on right now because he knows so much more about this than I do. But
we're trying to get those issues worked out. Yeah, but Dave, looking around in this league this year, when they start picking an all-conference team, who is your best quarterback up to this point?
Oh boy, that's a great question. I gotta think about that. I don't know. I don't know if maybe Jackson Dart. I mean, he's going to have the best numbers, obviously. Yeah. But it's not going to be Milroe. It's not going to be Ewers at Texas. It's not going to be Carson Beck. I think the jury's still out, but I guess you go with Jackson Dart. But no, I know I'm wrong. He's second. Diego Pavia is the best quarterback.
Here you go. And he doesn't have the best stats, passing numbers or anything like that, but he's just the best quarterback. You can make an argument for that. Matt Stinscombe said it last week on SEC Network. He said, I know a lot of people are going to say, you're crazy, but look at Diego. Ewers, to me, a quarterback has to step up on the biggest stage and come through. That's the litmus test, okay? So we hear all this talk about Jalen Milroe. No, he's not. He's not the best quarterback. I mean, I'm not sure. You can say, he'll be a great pro. I don't know. But I'll tell you one that I'm looking at who I think, Brady Cook. That's another one that was high, expectations coming into the season. Coming back against Auburn to get that win is proving to be very costly. And Missouri, in both cases where they went on the road to A&M and to Alabama, they've been outscored 75-10 or something like that. That is a terrible, stamp on Missouri football.
Yeah, the bottom just dropped out on the Missouri Tigers, and there were, I'm thinking back to last summer when we were, predicting the season. There were some smart minds on this show that predicted that would happen. I wasn't one of them. I thought they had a lot of upside, but the bottom dropped out exactly as you described. And going back to Jalen Milroe, I would encourage any coach that when you have a generational talent. I mean, Milroe has a ton of talent, and he is a smart guy too. He's very well read. He's studious. I would say, just watch how Lamar Jackson's career evolved, and that's really the blueprint. Because when in his freshman year at Louisville, Lamar Jackson had all the great numbers and the Heisman Trophy, but he wasn't yet a quarterback. But he has become a quarterback, and credit to Lamar Jackson, first and foremost, but credit to John Harbaugh as coach at the Ravens, for making him into a quarterback, and that's what that's the opportunity for Jalen Milroe, but we're not seeing it right now. I sure hope so, because he seems like a great guy. And I'd love for him to have, the rest of his college career to be good, and then to transcend into the NFL. But in my opinion, and echoing what you said, Rob, I think he's got a ways to go before he's a really, really good quarterback.
Yeah, and Lamar Jackson, that is a great example. Kid out of around Miami, South Florida, and came onto the scene in Louisville in 2015. He's become much more of a disciplined quarterback because he's always had the athletic tools. And, he and Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, Joe Brady, Joe Burrow. God, Joe Brady was the passing game coordinator at LSU. Joe Burrow, why does it? This is dumb. But and then Nico Iamaleava, all the expectations for him, they finally scored a touchdown, a point, period, after 3 consecutive zeros in the first half of SEC games, which has not happened since the early 62, 63 for Tennessee. And Kentucky put up a good fight. Tennessee is not winning because they have a great offense. and even though Josh Heupel is known for his offensive prowess, it's their defensive front seven. And James Pierce is just a lethal weapon. He's one of the absolute best players in college football. I'm talking, Hugh Green, Ricky Jackson type guys back at Pitt in 82 and 83 and 84 and 85. Hugh Green out of Natchez, Mississippi, man.
Wasn't a big guy either. He was not a big guy.
How tall was he? 6'1"?
I want to say 6 feet, maybe 6'1", something like that. I mean, he was. I remember they played Army when I was at West Point, and I was just surprised how small he was. He was like one of the Army guys. But yeah, he was just so smart. Had so much football IQ. And was never out of position. I mean, he was just. I remember the game when we played him, and I just watched him the entire time because it was just a clinic on how to play defense.
Yeah, when you watch those elite players, reality is stranger than fiction. When you see these guys in person, it almost looks effortless. Let's go back to Georgia, Florida. On the Buddy Martin show, was on there Tuesday, and I think again, Thursday night I was on as well. Got to be on twice last week, and that is an awesome show on this channel, Monday through Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, the Buddy Martin Show. They cover the Gators, the SEC, college football, all sports, with a great group of guests every night. I said, Rob, what's your pick on Georgia, Florida? Florida, Georgia for them. I said, I'm thinking that DJ Lagway is going to make a statement in this game, but not enough. I'm picking Georgia to win 32-21. Now, at halftime, it was close. It was 13-6, Florida. But in the second quarter, when DJ Lagway went out with a hamstring injury, that took the air out of the ball, and they put a Yaley in, the third-team quarterback. But what's your grade right now? What's your gut feeling on what you think happens at Florida this year? Because they're not getting destroyed, but they've also got to start getting the recruiting. They got to go from the top in the 40s or the 50s to top 10 if they just did well in their own state. UCF is imploding. Florida State is, who's going to row out the Titanic for happy hour? That's a mess.
1-8.
Yeah. What?
Yeah, they're the dumpster fire.
Fire.
Yeah, 5-alarm fire.
Yeah, 1-8.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Brendan's answer is because I don't want to get in trouble with the show's producer. But
you froze for a second. It's like Chief Osceola froze you with a magic spell.
Speared.
He got you.
Speared on you. Yeah.
So let's let Brenden answer that question. I have an opinion, but I'm not part of Gator Nation.
I didn't hear the question.
My opinion has no relevance.
We're endeavoring to get Coach Ellis Johnson on, and so we're going to try one more time when he gets back here. But what was the question, Rob?
Oh, I had just said about Florida. I said, what's your gut feeling on what you think will happen? I said, they're not getting blown out, but they're just not winning. But when DJ went out in the second quarter, it just took the wind out of the sail. And so now you have to say the recruiting classes in the 40s or the 50s, whatever, if they were to just do well in their own state, they'd be in the top 10 in recruiting, because the state of Florida is 1 or 2 in the country every year. I think what makes Florida high school football so well, and I want Coach Johnson's opinion if we can get him in to talk about it, and it's the track and field programs in the state of Florida. Mouse Holloway, the track and field coach at Florida, has won 14 national championships. And Coach Johnson, I want to ask him, Coach, can you hear us? Yep. Coach, can you hear us now?
Can you hear us now? I think we can hear you.
Coach, we can hear you. Okay. But when you're recruiting a player in high school, how important is it if they run track and field? And if they're a big guy, a big one, I'm talking a big lineman or linebacker, are you throwing the shot or the discus? I think that means a lot. Or if you're a wrestler.
I think dual sport athletes are always a good thing. Yeah, I think that's I think that's always a good thing. I think that's good to not concentrate on one thing and to be an athlete in general. Track and field, I think, is great for sprinters and, like not for sprinters, to sprint if you're a wide receiver, to work on the skill set and the muscle set that is indicative of becoming better at your position. Yeah. And I think, it's only going to make you faster. Now, if you're going to do that at Florida and you're also in track and field, well, then you are an elite athlete on two different sports, because track and field at Florida is, half of the Olympic team was for the University of Florida last year. But to answer your question, Rob, and see if we could try one more time, Coach. He's been so great. Coach, can you hear us by chance?
I can barely
hear
you.
Yeah, we can hear you. Hey, Coach.
Hey, man. Coach. Coach, I want to get your thoughts about how important it is when you're recruiting a high school kid if they have a track and field background.
Well, in general, I always liked recruiting kids that played other sports. But frankly, the track and field, other than getting some legit measurements on kids, you got watches on them that are not biased.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of carryover. I guess the greatest example, I think Nick Harbor at South Carolina, big time 5-star signee and Olympic trials possibility and all that. And they tried to put him as a wide receiver, and he really hadn't been that productive. But it sometimes correlates and sometimes it doesn't. It is not necessarily a good way to recruit football players.
Coach, what is it? Is it for like the specialty? The skill positions? I was just talking about wide receiver, especially at a place like Florida. Do they get faster and better, or do you want them to have downtime? Is there a point where you're worried about exhausting that athlete?
I don't think so. And if you would look at some of these major programs, you'd be shocked. They keep them lifting and running all year, even if they're not in another sport. Now, somebody could overdo it, but if they do, they're probably not under the supervision of a good coach. But I don't think you can do too much training at all.
And have you found that they get faster? Do they get? Is it worth it? Is it advantageous to them?
They can. It depends on how developed they are when they come in. If you get a player out of, say, a 5A or whatever it is out in Texas, 6A, 5A, whatever the top division is, they've normally had a strength program for 4 or 5 years, almost equal to the type of programs that Power 5 college teams have. And those kids are not going to change that much physically. They might get a little tougher, smarter, whatever. On the other hand, if you recruited a kid out of a little country school, 1A, 2A school, and he hasn't really developed, a lot of times they change over the first year. It's unbelievable the way they change. And that used to happen more often 30, 40 years ago. You all actually recruited, you had to project kids a lot more than you do now because they just have better programs and better training in high school.
Dave?
When he was at Cal, I would argue that Tony Gonzalez was just as good a basketball player as he was a football player. On the basketball team, he was the second best on the team to Jason Kidd. They advanced, I think, to the Elite Eight. They beat Duke in the second round. They were just but watching him play basketball, you knew what a great NFL tight end he was going to become. And he was a good football player, obviously, at Cal, but he was just as good a basketball player. But watching him play basketball, I think, let the smart scouts know in the NFL what a great tight end, obviously one of the best tight ends ever to play the game. So that's always my case study I use about dual sports athletes.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think we see a lot of that, especially in the recruiting world. Speaking of recruiting and coaching, I just want to shift gears because we're talking about the playoffs that are coming up, and we'll bring Rob back in here. I heard just so many great discussions about the parity in SEC, how SEC is bludgeoning itself. But how the talent is now really, thinned out. Do you see a possibility? We were discussing this before. We could get into a place, and this is for everybody, where we have 6 teams that have in the SEC with 2 losses. There's no tiebreaker in place, I don't think, for any of these things. You guys, are we headed down to a place where it's just the wheels could come off?
Well, there is a tiebreaker. If you read it, you'll get a headache. But
what is the tiebreaker, Coach? I don't know what the tiebreaker is.
I know the first part, and then it
Okay.
gets a little harder. Dave, I was in section 964 about after the first grading period at West Point. Anyhow, if you have two teams that are tied, it goes back to head-to-head competition. Who won the regular season game? Okay, you don't have that, then it goes to common opponents or something. You can pull it up and read it. They're about 4 or 5 steps. If you got to the last 4 or 5, it would be an absolute chaotic mess. And it's not impossible. These things seem to always work themselves out, but they do have a tiebreaker format in place.
Yeah.
And I would say that it's pretty likely that it's going to have to be used at least up to 1 step, maybe even more.
Wow,
Well, Coach,
I just feel like this it just got that vibe this year. It's all going to end up that way, right?
I want to take it right 1 step further. My gut feeling right now is Ole Miss may beat Georgia at Ole Miss.
Oh, I think they will.
They're a better
Coach.
football team right now than Georgia. Now, Georgia's proved they know how to handle the heat. They went out to Texas underdogs and got it done. They're not playing real well right now, and they've got a couple of key people banged up or hurt. And Ole Miss had their little dip earlier, and I think they look like they're really playing with confidence right now. So that could happen. And then, it'll get some guys, out of the way soon. It'll just depend on matchups.
Yeah, and it's going to be crazy. And Kevin Scarbinsky is in here with us right now. And I just think that what's cool, and Coach, I know, and thank God we got you on here because we had some technical issues at the beginning. But if you had to, before we get Kevin on with us in this conversation, who is the best quarterback that you've seen in the SEC? Because I look at how do they perform on the biggest stage, and that's a huge deal. And so we lost Coach, but Kevin, who is your
I can
best
still
quarterback?
hear you. I can hear you very well. Right?
Okay. Coach, who is your best quarterback in the SEC right now that you've seen?
Oh, boy.
Coach, if
When
you
they
just
really-
tap your screen, Coach, and it should pop back on.
Hold on.
I
think
think it just fell asleep on you.
Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
When if they're all playing well, I'd take Milrow. That's who I'd want. Now, but yours when he's healthy, and a lot of these guys have better surrounding casts.
Yeah.
But the kid from Georgia, really good player, but he's not. He can't do it on his own. He can't pick up a team and carry it with his feet and his arm like a Milrow can.
Yeah.
I don't think he was good either, but he could better than I bet. But that's a hard question to answer. But like I said, if they're all playing at their best, I would take Milrow.
Kevin?
I would say, and good morning, everyone. Glad to be with you. When they're not playing their best, I would like Diego Pavia. There is something about that young man. There's something about being a winner.
Yeah.
He did not play anywhere close to his best football on Saturday. Did not complete a pass in the second or third quarter.
Yeah.
And yet, when they had to have it, he made plays, put together that long drive that put the game away in the fourth quarter. There's just something special about that guy. And as Coach said, he doesn't have the greatest surrounding cast of the quarterbacks in the SEC, but he seems to elevate the guys around him, and he seems to step up when you need a quarterback to step up. So I just like the way he plays. I like his spirit. I like his leadership. He's been a difference maker for Vandy. There's no question.
State wrestling
Two
champion.
things I really like about him.
Yeah.
Number one, he hardly ever makes the play that just kills his football team. And number two, not only the leadership, but he makes critical plays at critical times. It's just like you say, just a winner and a leader, very poised kid. He has his limitations, but it seems that he knows what they are, and so does the system that the coaches put him in. And he's like I said, he is a winner.
Well, for all of y'all, I'm going to throw this out at you, Kevin, Dave, whoever wants to answer it, Coach. When you look at what Vanderbilt's doing this year, Clark Lee at Media Days in Dallas, in his opening remarks, said, I know a lot of you, this will go over your head, but it's a big deal to us. Every kid in that football building here at Vanderbilt signed up for what we believe in. There's no one from the previous staff, with all due respect. They've all signed up for our vision of Vanderbilt football. I don't know Clark Lee, but he went to MBA. He's a Nashville guy, the Gentleman Scholars MBA. There's a lot of pride. And Barton Simmons came in there, who was one of those recruiting gurus for a long time, who was an all Ivy League safety at Yale. I think he was a high school teammate of Clark's. Is it possible that toxic losing culture has been put over on the side, kind of like what Tim Corbin did with the baseball program, and Vanderbilt is not going back to where they were, and they'll go out and get them, and they've got money. Go shake that cup out in Belle Meade. You can get some money. I mean, if they wake up their money, what could happen with Vanderbilt football? I mean, Coach, Kevin, Dave, y'all know what could happen.
You want me to say? Well, first of all, you can't equate baseball to football. It's two different animals totally. And some of those guys that Tim had, they're number one draft choices in the major leagues. But I do think you're making a great point. And if you're going to make a big living bringing in portal kids, you have to you have to do a great job of screening them. You just can't go out there and see if you can pay them a little bit more money than the other guy. The two examples, I think, is Vanderbilt on one hand, how they've done it successfully, and Florida State just fell apart. And they evidently got some kids that came in and they were good enough, but they weren't committed and they weren't, buying into what they wanted to do. And they've got a mess on their hands, and they'll be in the portal for 30 kids again this year.
And look at what they did also. They didn't just bring in Diego Pavia. They brought in Jerry Kill as an analyst, his head coach. They brought in his offensive coordinator to run the offense. They brought in some of his teammates from New Mexico State. Those guys have been at places that are not, by any stretch of the imagination, football factories. And yet they found ways to win, to instill a winning attitude. Look at what New Mexico State did last year with that bunch. That is one of the lesser programs in the Football Bowl subdivision, yet they found a way to win there. And now they're doing something similar at Vanderbilt. So kudos to Clark Lee. And Ellis, I'd love to hear Ellis' thoughts on this. Not all coaches are secure enough in their own skin to bring in former head coaches, to bring in an offensive coordinator with a quarterback and say, we're going to run the system that fits this guy best. We saw Nick Saban do it a lot, bring in former head coaches who may have lost their way for one reason or another. Yeah. And then they were obviously good football coaches, but they had other issues. He gave them a second chance. Nick was never afraid to surround himself with head coaches. That's not true of all head coaches. And I think that's an asset to your program if you bring in the right guys at the right time.
Yeah, but there's no question that helped bring in the system with the quarterback who's already run the system, et cetera. And if you go back and check Jerry Kill's track record, I mean, his winning has been consistent, and it's been at places, I think Minnesota, and I can't remember the one before that.
Northern Illinois, wasn't it?
I think it might have been. And
the Huskies.
He might still be winning at Minnesota, but he had the illness that had to take a step away. Yeah. But he's got a track record, and I think you're exactly right for Clark to be able to see that and not be concerned about bringing in someone and turning over a portion of his program to him. I think that's a sign of good leadership, frankly.
Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I you know me, I always jump over to basketball with my analogies, but, look what Mark Few did at Gonzaga. Look what Brad Stevens did at Butler. Look what Bucky McMillan is doing at Samford. Clark Lee is that kind of ilk, and he's building a program. He's to Kevin's point, he brought not only Diego, but he brought coaches, players, really a unit. He brought a unit in from New Mexico State, and he changed the culture overnight. And he did it from the top, from his level, and he did it from the top on the field, which is the quarterback. And I think it's a blueprint for success. I think there's a lot of upside for Vanderbilt, and I'm happy for that too. I really am. It's nice to see the smart school do well in the SEC, and I hope it continues.
Yeah, and they're having fun with it. We own the state of Alabama. I mean, I got several texts from some viewers in Tuscaloosa this morning. It said, let's just admit it. We're a basketball school, and I'm like, well, so is Auburn. I mean, the thing is, you better show up, coach, and everybody on here knows this. You better show up ready for a fight and ready to play. I always tell fans this. It's instilled in me. If you're going to expect the team to play a full 60, the fans have to stay a full 60. And this stuff of leaving games early because your team's down, would you do that to your own children? I can't. I detest that. I'm sorry. I detest it. People get down there and they got their arms folded and they're in the stands. I know we get frustrated, but when you're around the scholarship donors at the seats, whether it's at Bryant Denny or Jordan Hare or Williams-Brice Stadium, you ever notice when you're in the Nelson Club at Auburn or the Tide Pride or whatever, you don't hear all that cussing and negativity. People will run you out of there so fast because they are investors. They've got their money, lots of it, invested in the game. What is the story right now, Kevin, with this season in the SEC, a trend or something that you're seeing that you didn't expect to be happening, good or bad?
Well, the relative parity. By this time, in how many seasons going back, you knew that, and it was easier to project when you had divisions, who was going to be in Atlanta from the West, who was going to be there from the East. If you didn't already know at the start of November that it was going to be Alabama and Georgia, which it was a lot of years going back to 2018 in that SEC championship game, you knew it was a short list. There might be one other contender in the West. There might be one other contender in the East. There's no way to know right now. What is it? 5 teams with 1 loss in the conference after 1 weekend in November? I don't know when's the last time we saw this kind of parity. And obviously the conditions of the game today, the transfer portal, NIL, who's managing that best, who's struggling with it, is really having an impact on more teams at this point having an opportunity to go to Atlanta, play in the SEC championship game. And if you're in the SEC championship game, you're going to be in the college football playoff. That's one thing I think everyone can agree on now that we don't have divisions and it's going to be 1 versus 2 in Atlanta.
Yeah. Coach, I know you've got a busy day, but we got you on, but we'll keep you a few more minutes because I like I said, love having you on and do it again next week. But when you look at SEC top to bottom, I brought this up earlier in the show, is how different is the league from what it was last year or maybe 10, 15 years ago?
Well, it is more parity, and I think it's kind of the same teams are still up there that have the shot at it.
Yeah.
But they're not unblemished because they don't have the depth, and they don't have the depth to just go undefeated until that end thing because some of them left and went in the portal and didn't stay. They weren't going to be the rotational player. They want to go somewhere and start. So, and it's all just, I don't have any empirical evidence on it. I just think that's what I observed. But, I look at it, Georgia, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Texas, and other than Texas A&M, LSU, Alabama, these are the teams that still have a really good shot to win it. And they're always the ones that have won it. And so that part hadn't changed. You go down in the bottom and there's still South Carolina, there's still Mississippi State, there's still Kentucky, there's still Arkansas, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not perfectly aligned, but it hadn't changed it too much. It's just made it where everybody's more vulnerable on any given weekend. Vanderbilt doesn't beat Alabama every 5 years. And things like that are happening more often now because of the transferring.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I got a question from a viewer down in Fort Lauderdale. And, he said, Kevin, when you get a chance, we'll do it later in the show. If you could talk about Auburn's history of coaches with huge buyouts and how dangerous it is to pull the trigger every 2 or 3 years, because look what happened to Tennessee. It's happened to a lot of schools. So we'll get into that in a minute. Coach, one more question before we let you go. Clemson. I got to ask you about Clemson. I know your son's on that team there. They lost to Louisville the other day. Dabo has a great record as a coach. What do you is talking about doing anything heavily. He goes very selective, 5 or 6 guys. Do you see maybe Dabo doing that?
Well, he has actually looked in the portal some the last few years. Hadn't taken a lot of kids, but what happens is they'll say, okay, we've got a little problem here in this position, this position. He's not ready next year. And then they go looking for someone to come in and fill it. And one of these kids wants $30,000 a month to come in. And he said, well, I'll give that kid that much and he'll be that good next year. So he is still trying to go the developmental route. And I think he's trying to keep stability in the locker room. And that has been true. Now, this Saturday, every time they lose a game, everybody wants to start criticizing his approach. But every time they win 6 in a row, everybody thinks, well, I wish everybody else would start doing that. It's not why he's winning or losing. It's just he's taking that route. And I think over the long haul, it's going to keep them, if they keep it up, it's going to keep them from getting that key win or that key player here or there. They're going to always have somewhere in that lineup, there's a developmental player trying to catch up, where somebody else goes and gets it. Now, some people are going to get them. And like I said, it blew up on Florida State. So it's not always the answer. Now, they just played bad against Louisville, and Louisville is a better team than their record. They're a decent team. I wasn't surprised at all they get upset. They could be upset the next 2 weekends. These teams are good enough to beat them, but the way they lost was a concern for me. They didn't play well on either side of the ball, and they even had really bad situations in the kicking game. So they just didn't play well, and it makes you scratch your head and figure out what the hell we do wrong last week in preparation. But who knows?
Yeah, Coach, how do people follow you, keep up with you? You are so knowledgeable. Your record and all like that. It's like bringing a great trial attorney into the courtroom. But love having you on, and we'll look forward to having you on next week.
I enjoy being on. I'm sorry about all these technical difficulties. I do a couple of these things, and it never has an issue, but I can't ever seem to get it right with y'all. So I'll try to figure out what's wrong.
We'll get it right. I'm going to watch you again this week with Ronnie Sanders and the crew at AU Undercover. I talked to Ronnie yesterday. He's a big fan of yours. So we'll do it again and look forward to it and getting it all worked out.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Thanks, Coach. Let me say something real quick about one of our sponsors. LandersFordMemphis.com, located at Poplar and Houston Levy, open Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Service department opens 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Look, car, truck, SUV, whatever you're looking for, call out there. Let them know you heard about them on SEC Sidelines Sports Network. Ask the general manager, Brad Bellamy. They will hook you up with a salesman, and it's an easy process. They'll walk you through it. They are hands-on, and they are invested in the Mid-South. Their name, their logo, Landers Ford Memphis.com, is on 6 sports stadiums in the area. We had the Landers Bowl, I called it, last Friday night. Houston and Collierville High School, both are Landers stadiums. They're great people. They sponsor the Touchdown Club. They are invested all over. Wherever you are, LandersFordMemphis.com, they will deliver vehicles. And also, if you're having maintenance done on your car, truck, or SUV, they will come pick you up and take you in. How about that for a novel idea? Where their motto is, if you didn't buy your last vehicle from LandersFordMemphis.com, you probably paid too much. God, Lee, Kevin, Dave, it was so much fun getting this panel together. I think Coach really hit on something. The same teams are there. It's just they don't have the unblemished record. Remember in the past, just a few years ago, a perfect record was attainable. I don't see a 7-5 team winning the whole thing like the 9-7 Giants did in 2007 when they beat the 18-0 Patriots. But do you think in year one of the 12-team playoff, gentlemen, we'll see a 9-3 team get in the playoff? Anyone?
Oh, I don't know. The way it's shaking out right now, I think that's a bit of a long shot.
Yep.
But as we said last week, this month, and we've already seen it, is going to be wild. There's no telling where we're going to be 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, after the regular season plays out, before we go into conference championship games. I mean, look at the games that still have to be played. Georgia, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Alabama, LSU. There are so many big, critical, season-changing games still to be played that it's almost impossible to predict. And as Ellis said, I think even the best teams have vulnerabilities that maybe they didn't have in the past. Maybe it was depth, having a guy who was almost as good as the starter, able to step up if necessary, et cetera, et cetera. So if you don't play well on any given Saturday, this used to be the cliche. It was never actually true, but now it's closer to true than ever. If you don't play well on a given Saturday in the SEC this year, there's a chance you're going to get beat.
Yeah. And someone put on here, do you think Mike Norvell, who has a $64 million buyout, will be the one that breaks the camel's back? By the way, I've never seen a camel's back broken, but I wouldn't think that'd be a pretty sight to be water everywhere. It's like someone breaks the water cooler. I just thought about that.
By a straw.
Okay, Dave, you and I are in the financial world, private equity with you and venture capital. $64 million check would have to be certified. I need a $64 million cashier's check. You're not just going to take a check written by Joe Sixpack from, Olathe, Kansas, are you? Unless he's like somebody, Joe Sixpack, the billionaire.
I used to live near Olathe as a kid. We spent 6 years in Kansas City, Overland Park, which is adjacent to Olathe. And Norvell might be the final straw. Then don't look now at Auburn, but Hugh Freeze's record is now worse than Brian Harson's. So, and Freeze has a big buyout. Will there be a 3-loss team in the playoff? I don't think so this year, just because the field is so deep. I mean, the field goes about 26, 28 teams deep right now. So I think, there'll be some 2-loss teams in there, but I doubt there'll be a 3-loss team in there. I think the SEC championship will still have at least one team with 1 loss, maybe 2 teams with 1 loss. So, but if there's an SEC team in the championship with 2 losses, and they lose 3 losses, well, they probably still do get in the playoffs. It's who knows at this point. It's just fascinating. And one thing I'm really excited about is learning, like in basketball, in the tournament, they say guards win in March Madness. Is there going to be some sort of dynamic like that? Like is it going to be a Diego Pavia type quarterback versus a Jalen Milroe type quarterback? Wins in the playoff because you have to win 4 times. I don't know, but it's going to be interesting to see what sort of dynamic a tournament team versus a regular season team.
Yeah. Kevin, a question from a viewer down in Fort Lauderdale, Clarence Beeks. I guess he has the crop reports from Trading Places. But Clarence wanted to know, he said, ask Kevin to chronicle Auburn's history. And you wrote one of your columns several years ago. When is Auburn, and I think Jay Jacobs was there at Auburn, when is Auburn and one of the people at Auburn who spend all this money going to learn the lesson to quit giving these coaches these big buyouts? So kind of shed a little bit of light on that for Clarence Beeks in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, who's at the boat show.
It was the Dukes. It was the Dukes.
It was the Dukes. I don't seem to recall a Beeks on the paper. We can
spend the rest of the time just quoting lines from
beef jerky time.
I love it.
I'm not an economist, but the college football economy has been broken for a long time, and how it got to the place where you have to guarantee a coach an obscenely large buyout. If you want to blame an individual, and it's really not blameworthy because Jimmy Sexton's doing his job.
Yeah.
But the biggest mismatches in SEC history have been Jimmy Sexton against athletic directors, college presidents, boosters, anyone deciding on hiring a coach and what the contract's going to say.
Yeah.
Jimmy is dominant in that area like no one else.
Yeah.
Why they have gone along with it, why coaches' salaries haven't been based more on performance.
Yeah.
And why, when we're paying a guy 10, 9, 10, 12, $13 million a year, and then we give him performance bonuses?
Yeah.
What are the 9, 10, 11, and 12, $13 million for?
Yes.
Showing up each day?
Yeah.
Punching in a time clock? Come on. Isn't that for your performance?
Yeah.
You touched a sore spot there, Clarence, with me. It is laughable that institutions of higher learning are throwing this kind of money around, throwing this kind of money away in so many cases. First of all, by not vetting. The fact that these guys are not vetted better. The case study of Auburn's hiring of Bryan Harsin, the lack of true vetting of Bryan Harsin on the front end led to what happened on the back end. And why are ADs and presidents, et cetera, not held accountable for these massive financial mistakes that they make with these hires and these contracts they throw around like they're Halloween candy is beyond me. And I don't know what it's going to take to change the system, because that system is broken. And for all the people out there who want to blame the players, well, the players are greedy. The players forget the player. Look at the coaches. Look at the coaches. Look at the amount of money Auburn in particular has spent and has paid people not to coach at Auburn because they failed at some point along the line. It is obscene. And you can tell it's a sore subject with me. Again, the problem, though, to me is more so on the front end. It's how you vet these guys, who's making the decision to hire these people, and then the amount of money that you're throwing at them on the front end. It's out of control. I don't know what the fix is, but it needs to be fixed. Far more than we need to fix NIL and what we're going to pay players. And now the schools are going to pay them directly starting next year. $20.5 million is the number thrown out as a salary cap, if you will. That's what we're going to pay all of the players, $20.5 million. All of the athletes, we're going to pay one coach $13 million.
It's insane.
Well, it's
crazy.
It seems like there's never this discussion, and all the failures, there's never this discussion of how much is this going to cost us if we make the wrong decision.
Yes.
Let's look at it from the other way. Let's don't be desperate to make a decision and announce it, and then we can get a couple players out of the portal and get some positive momentum. But if we make a wrong decision, I mean, it's going to cost us a number of years. It's going to cost us it's hundreds of millions of dollars, to undo a bad decision. And I hope we're not wrong, but gosh, Auburn might be in the midst of having made two bad ones in a row. And it's just, to Kevin's point, you got to vet them. And if you've got to go a little ways with the interim coach and maybe, have a hiccup for a season, that's a lot better or a lot less worse than what happens when you make a bad decision and you don't vet them on the front end.
Yeah. And Kevin, Dr. Stephen Leith was hired July of 2017 at Auburn from Iowa State and was not vetted. He had a history. He wrecked the plane up there and just a bombastic jerk. He survived at Auburn 23. He survived 23 months, 17 days, 6 hours, 10 minutes, and 11 seconds before he was mercifully fired on Friday in June of 2019, less than 2 years into his tenure. But in that time, he hired Alan Green, the AD, who hired Bryan Harsin. And Leith he tried to go after hard. He wanted to get rid of Bruce Pearl, it looked like. And then the $16 million they spent renovating the President's Mansion at Auburn multiple times. Dr. Stephen Leith is referred to as the $100 million mistake at Auburn. But I'm with you. In the investment world, if you invest $20 million into said stock and said stock goes to zero and you get a $1 courtesy bid for tax purposes, you don't get your $20 million back. You lost $20 million, which you're going to have to carry forward for thousands of years to amortize that down to zero. And there's no accountability with these athletic directors. And then there's these, Kevin, the search firms that are, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, that dump and place these athletic directors that are not qualified at universities around the country in many cases just to do a favor for a friend. There's no accountability.
Look at Rob. That's
crazy.
A great point. Look at how much money Ross Bjork cost Texas A&M. Giving Jimbo Fisher the raise and extension a couple of years ago, then turning around and paying that enormous buyout, and Ross Bjork is rewarded by getting the Ohio State job.
Yeah.
How does, we've heard the phrase fail up.
Yeah.
That happens more in that world than I think in maybe any other profession. And I don't understand it. Again, the lack of accountability. And there's a difference. And we don't often talk about college presidents and their role in this. And you just mentioned Stephen Leath is one of the worst things that ever happened to Auburn University as a whole, beyond the athletic department.
And he was never vetted by the Board of Trustees. And those people should never be allowed to be on the Board of Trustees ever again.
Well, that's a whole other story.
Yeah,
the Auburn
exactly.
Board of Trustees and its transformation through the years. But the president, Auburn's had the contrast. Stephen Leath wanted to be involved in athletics. That was unfortunate for Auburn because he didn't know what he was doing.
Correct.
Then you had Jay Gouge, who was the president before, and then he came back as the interim president to try to calm the waters. He didn't care about athletics. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. He wanted to have his people, and who some of his people were a problem, run the thing, and don't bother me. I got a university to run. So somewhere in between, there's a happy medium between Stephen Leath and Jay Gouge. And now you have in Chris Roberts, I hear a lot of good things about Chris Roberts as the Auburn president, but what is his profession? He's an engineer, right, Rob?
He is an engineer. He was the dean of the College of Engineering.
Who is the Auburn president who came from that same background when Jetgate happened?
Dr. William Walker. Yeah.
Yes.
But I do.
I'm not trying to predict history repeating itself. So I don't know what's going to happen with Auburn. I don't know what's going to happen with Hugh Freeze. I've been saying it from the start. Hugh Freeze was the wrong choice for Auburn. And I think it's being borne out right now. And then in a microcosm of what's wrong at Auburn, and we saw it Saturday, the right transfer portal quarterback at Vanderbilt, the absolute wrong transfer portal quarterback at Auburn. Not only did Hugh Freeze tap Peyton Thorne in the first place, brought him back this year and thought he could get it done this year with him at quarterback. Those are massive season-killing mistakes.
Yeah, and nobody's held accountable anymore for way too much stuff. These are state universities funded by public tax dollars, yet you have no access to practice or anything. I'm surprised writers, sports writers, media people haven't filed. I know in Tennessee we have the sunshine laws, shed a little light on the situation for public meetings, public records. I'm surprised that hasn't happened. These people are allowed to just do whatever they want, piss your money away at their leisure with no accountability. I got a great thing here from a viewer who's texted me. I wish they would send in your comments, people, on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. But he said, Kevin is correct. Gouge and Green should have to pay Harson's buyout. Sorry, Leath. The only redeeming quality I heard ever about Dr. Stephen Leath was he was an avid outdoorsman and turkey hunter. But other than that, nothing good. I heard he was famous for just screaming and yelling at people all the time. I mean, but look around the country. When you've got bad decisions made, there are consequences. And we're about out of time. But, guys, this is a great discussion because, university presidents come in and they better know. Dr. Chris Roberts understands the importance. He's been at Auburn 28 years. He's a Missouri and Notre Dame grad, dean of the College of Engineering. Our good friend Maury Gaston, who's on this show a lot, is very close to Dr. Roberts. And Dr. Roberts understands the relationship between athletics and academics in the whole university. And you remember years ago, guys, Dr. Joab Thomas who was he the president when Curry was there that said Alabama doesn't need to be a football school? Was he the one that said that, guys?
He was
I'm
the
pretty
president.
sure he was, yeah.
Yeah, he was the president who should have hired Bobby Bowden, but instead chose Bill Curry.
Yeah. And
we can either do it on this show or next time I'm on, I'll describe basically how the athletic director and the president ruined the athletic program at Stanford.
Yeah. I mean, and you know
describe
what?
it now, or I can do it next show. I know we're out of time.
Well, yeah, but Dave, we will do it because for whatever reason, gentlemen, there are people out there who are selfish and they will destroy an athletic department, and that's not good because so much good comes from it. But look, great show. Brenden Martin, executive producer, comes through as always, getting Coach Ellis Johnson on here with us. Check out all of our sponsors. I want to say about Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee, open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Stuff coming in every day. Barber, Filson, Duckhead. Take the virtual tour online, hewlettanddunn.com. Over 7,000 pairs of men's and women's boots. Great-looking women's stuff. Pendleton, Schaefer, oh, my God, Marshwear. They got these hoodies and camo. Got great stuff out there. Proud to have them as a sponsor. And the Vitamin Shop, Olive Branch in Oxford, Mississippi. All these places, go to our website, sidelines.live. Hyperlinks are all there. Gentlemen, thanks so much for participating. Got through some technical tsunamis today, but great content and good to have Clarence Beeks checking in. Next time, maybe he'll give us the crop reports and beef jerky. Oh, thank you, my friend. No, thank you. It gives me the wind something terrible. But for executive producer Brenden Martin, say thank you. Watch the Buddy Martin Show on this channel tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern, and we will be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern with another stacked show. Great day. All right, Brenden.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.